Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the founder of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I really appreciate you being with me. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. Uh, I got to go to another automotive swap meet, like I mentioned to you earlier. Uh, I'm a gearhead. I'm a rustaholic. and I absolutely love to go to swap meets. Found some bargains. I didn't find much, though, I can tell you. The days of going to a swap meet and filling up a pickup with bargains to sell are just about over. I can tell you that. But I did find a brand spanking new set of Hooker Super Comp small block Ford Mustang headers. And that's a $500 set of headers. And I got them for 35 bucks. It was a restoration shop just cleaning out their excess. I've known the guy, not very much, but I've known of him for a good long while. Really good guy, and so he was asking considerably more than I paid, but I finally got him for 35 bucks. Brand spanking new Hooker Super Comp headers. I love swap meets. I really love swap meets, even though the pickings are kind of slim. It just don't you just can't beat the bargains that you can find sometimes. Okay, let's get back to it. We are continuing our examination of Israel's feast days. We are focused specifically on Shemeni Atzerat and the concept of the new creation. That is because in Israel's mentality, in Israel's history, in Israel's writings, you have Sukkot, the quote last feast day of the year, lasted for 7 days. And you have reference to the last day of the feast in John chapter 7, in which Jesus stood up. I've shared with you what it must have been like on that day. It must have been absolutely astounding to be a part of that, to witness that. But nonetheless, Sukkot was the last festival of the year, and it was the turning of the year. Shemeni Atzerat was an eighth day, and it celebrated a new beginning. And thus, in Jewish literature, you have Shemeni Atzerat being associated with the concept of a new beginning, a new creation. Now, that's what we're building on, because the New Testament writers were eagerly anticipating the arrival of the new heaven and new earth, wherein dwells righteousness. 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 13. And John was looking for a new heaven and a new earth. As the old heaven and the old earth would flee away, and a new heaven and a new earth would flow out of that. Now, what I shared with you last Wednesday in regard to the new heaven and new earth is greatly overlooked in the literature, in the commentators. So I feel it necessary to really drive home this point. Couple of refresher points. All right. The new heaven and new earth, for instance, of 2 Peter chapter 3, would be in fulfillment of Isaiah 64 to 66. So let me rephrase this, or let me phrase it like this. The day of the Lord to bring in the new creation of 2 Peter chapter 3 would be in fulfillment of the old covenant promises of the day of the Lord to bring in the new heaven and new earth. Isaiah 64 through 66 was a prophecy of the day of the Lord to bring in the new heaven and the new earth. The day of the Lord of Isaiah chapter 64 to 66 would be a day of the Lord like previous days of the Lord. Isaiah 64, 1 and 2, or actually 1 through 3. Therefore, the day of the Lord of 2 Peter chapter 3 would be like previous days of the Lord, which means it was not intended to be a prediction of the end of the time-space continuum, and it's not about the end of human history. Previous days of the Lord were times of judgment on a given nation, kingdom, people, in which Yahweh utilized one nation to judge another nation. And in the prophecy of Isaiah 64 through 66, Yahweh was going to destroy Old Covenant Jerusalem. How would he do that? Well, we know how he would do that because in the Jewish War of AD 66 to 70, Jesus came in the glory of the Father like the Father had come, and he utilized in his sovereignty the Roman army to judge Jerusalem. This is really, really important. Second point of refreshing from last week, and that is in Paul's doctrine of the salvation of Israel. In Paul's doctrine, he said, Romans chapter 9, verse 28, a short work will the Lord make upon the earth. He will cut it short and bring it to pass shortly, conflating different translations there. Now, Paul uses two very important Greek words, soon tilon, soon timnon. They sound a lot alike because they're sort of kind of related. Suntilon means to bring to its consummation, to finish it. It is from soon, it is a compound word, obviously, soon, and telos. Telos means goal or completion. So to bring it to its completion was the soon telon. And then he would bring it to pass shortly. Soon team known. Folks, there is simply no way to make soon tilon and soon tinon refer to a period of 2,000 years, because Paul is very clear. It wasn't going to be a long work of bringing the salvation of the remnant to its perfection, to its completion. He will bring it to pass shortly. Just go to Bible Gateway, ladies and gentlemen, BibleGateway.com. Look up Romans chapter 9, verse 28, and then click on all English translations. You will see there is absolute, total scholarly translational agreement that Paul was expressing the then present, by the way, it's in the present participle, the then present salvation of the remnant. It was already ongoing, but the Lord would cut it short, bring it to pass shortly. Now that means, follow me closely here, that since Isaiah said, Isaiah 65, verse 6 and 7, as one says of the wine that is in the cluster, do not destroy it all because there is a blessing in it. Even so, I will not destroy them all. What's God saying? God is saying that in the day of the Lord, to bring in the new creation, he would save not all Israel, but a remnant. Because you see, starting in chapter 9 through chapter 10 into chapter 11, Paul's entire focus is on the salvation of the remnant. I've been in a conversation on Facebook with a guy, and he says, well, you're changing the definition of all Israel to some. Well, that's Paul's doctrine. There is nowhere in the prophecies of the Old Testament, nowhere in which God ever promised to save all of Israel. The promise was that he would save a righteous remnant, but there would be a consummation of that salvation, meaning that the all Israel to be saved was in fact the body of the righteous remnant. And let me emphasize this point again that I went over last week, because this is so critically important. And this is what too few commentators pay attention to. I mentioned last week that N.T. Wright is one that does take note of it. All right. But far too few commentators, they just kind of gloss right over this. And they ignore the fact that Paul is emphatic in Romans 9, 10, and 11 that it was a remnant that would be saved. And then they jump to the fact, well, we're looking for the time in which the entire nation, maybe not every single individual, but certainly the corporate body, and this is the postmillennial view down through the ages, it's the view that the majority of the Jews at the end of the Christian age will be saved. Then that violates every single thing that Paul said about the salvation of the remnant. And it violates every single thing that Paul said in regard to the salvation of the remnant that was going on at that time, and that work would be brought to pass shortly and quickly. Are we supposed to believe that Paul was talking about the salvation of the remnant in Romans 9, 10, and in the first part of chapter 11, and then in chapter 11, 25 and 26, all of a sudden he said, well, never mind what I've said about the salvation of just the remnant. You know what? I think God's going to save all Israel. No, that makes no sense whatsoever. I read at least one commentator who tried to argue that, but folks, it makes no sense. A third point, in regard to the salvation of the remnant, when Paul says he will bring it to pass shortly, a short work will the Lord make on the earth, and he's talking about the salvation of the remnant, that meant that judgment of the whole body was about to take place. That is demonstrated in Isaiah, it's demonstrated in Hosea, it's demonstrated in Amos and Micah and other prophetic books as well. When God promised the salvation of the remnant at historical days of the Lord, you know what that meant? It meant that the body of Israel was going to be destroyed in an imminent judgment. In the book of Amos, chapter 5, it was the imminent judgment of the Assyrians coming in to destroy the 10 northern tribes, carry them off into captivity. Oh, but a remnant would return. Only a remnant. As Isaiah chapter 10, speaking of the same impending judgment, though the children of Israel be as the stars of the heavens, yet only a remnant shall be saved. Folks, are you tracking with me on this? Paul's doctrine of the then ongoing salvation of the remnant, with the promise that it would be cut short in righteousness, that it would not be a long drawn out affair, means, point number one, that since the salvation of the remnant would be found in the new creation, and since the doctrine of the salvation of the remnant always implied an imminent judgment of the body, that means that Paul, in his doctrine of the salvation of the remnant that was then ongoing, that would lead to the new creation, also meant that the body of Israel was about to come under horrific, catastrophic judgment. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, the doctrine of salvation and the doctrine of condemnation are synchronous events. You cannot separate them temporally by centuries and millennia. Okay, you need to get a copy of my book, Elijah Has Come, a solution for Romans 11, 25 to 27. In that book, I go into great detail into Paul's doctrine of the salvation of the remnant. I believe you will find that transformative. I believe that you will find that not only informative, but you will find it life-changing. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Order the book, Elijah Has Come, a solution for Romans 11, 25 to 27. And if you will send me a note that says you saw the offer on my morning musings on Shemeni Atzerat or something similar to that, I will refund your shipping. Okay? That's going to save you almost $6. Boy, shipping has just gotten terrible. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this morning's morning musings. I will see you on the flip side.